Hello everyone, Alexa Dunn here, and today I am answering a question that I knew that this misconception, this myth, this problem was floating around the writer's sphere, but I didn't realize how pervasive it was until I got this question not once, not twice, but 3 times on the comments of my most recent video post, which was, how much does it cost to be traditionally published? And one of the big questions I got was, what about paying an editor, a freelance editor, to edit your manuscript before you query? So we're gonna talk about that because you shouldn't. You shouldn't have to pay a freelance editor to work on your book if you're going to be traditionally published, and especially not before querying. How do I feel about this topic? I feel... Really, I'd like to know where this came from. Like, where did this advice come from? Who is giving the advice? Why are we doing this? Why? Why is this happening? Why? 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 So the reason this really frustrates me is that it is just phenomenally and colossally bad advice that you should, or you have to, or you're required to hire a freelance editor, to pay money for an editor to help you edit your book, or to edit your book before you submit it to agents or even to traditional publishers. The entire point of traditional publishing, the whole point, is so that you don't have to do this. When you get traditionally published, part of the reason you make less money than you do with, say, self-publishing is you are getting a cut of the profit, and the payment structures are such because your publisher's job is to edit your book, or it's really to work with you to edit your book. But they have multiple people on staff or on retainer whose only job is editing. Developmental editing, line editing, copy editing, past pages, which is just like very detail-oriented editing. Literally their job, guys. Literally their job. So the number one thing I want to say is, seriously, in traditional publishing, money should always flow to the author. You shouldn't be paying these kinds of out-of-pocket expenses for the things that your publisher does for you. It's part of the bargain of traditional publishing. Now, I'm not pointing fingers, or I'm not getting mad at any of you who have done this, or, you know, or the people who are giving this advice. I honestly think the people who do are either mistaken, or they are one of those rare creatures who has money to burn and has a good experience hiring a freelance editor to help them on their book before querying. But the other thing about traditional publishing is the reason you shouldn't have to pay someone to edit your book before you get traditionally published is part of kind of the minimum standards for admission in traditional publishing for being a professionally published author in that realm is your writing should meet a minimum standard of quality. This means you as the author should learn over time and through work and diligence to edit your own work. If you want to really play game in the traditional publishing industry and be a professionally published author, you need to learn how to self-edit. Now, you're not completely alone in this. This is what critique partners are for, what the community of writers are for. You find like-minded individuals who are familiar with your genre, who are also writers, and you exchange manuscripts and you give each other feedback, and then working off of other people's input on your work, you develop a revision plan and you edit your own manuscript. And it's not just editing, it is revision. It is a true skill of really like diving into your book and fixing it, basically, and you need to learn how to do this on your own. So I realize it might sound daunting, but it's not as bad as it sounds. It really just means that you, as the writer, you need to have a decent enough grasp on kind of spelling, grammar, usage, prose, craft, and so on, that you can produce a relatively clean and, you know, readable draft on your own, so to speak, without paying someone. Because when you do actually get published, when you're working with an agent and then you go out and you get a book deal, this is what they're going to expect of you. They're not going to hold your hand. Now, they're going to work with you to edit your book. As I said, that is literally their job. But it's the expectation that to play the game that you've already established and developed a whole skill set when it comes to writing your work, editing your work, and so on. Really, if you hire freelance editors to work on your books before, say, you query, let's say they actually do a great job, well, you're setting yourself up for failure later because you're going to be locked into this cycle of you're always going to have to pay someone to edit your work because your agent and your editor are going to expect that standard of writing when you turn things in. So if you are literally incapable of producing a clean and, well-crafted manuscript without paying someone else $2,000, $3,000 to edit it, well, that's just a cycle where you're always going to be paying out of pocket. Seriously, it would behoove you to learn how to edit your own work. I just feel that hiring a freelance editor before you query is as much a crutch as it is a tool. I think every writer who's good enough to get an agent and good enough to be traditionally published is certainly good enough to, find free critique partners and learn how to edit their own work, to write and edit their own work, so it meets that minimum standard of quality, which again is a really nebulous thing. It's not official. This is me telling you anecdotally that this is something that I see exists in traditional publishing. Just when you read work by people who do get agents and do get book deals, there's just kind of this base level that's really hard to explain or pin down of kind of the sentence structure and the prose and the craft and the cleanness of the writing. And most of those authors, they achieve that without paying anyone to edit their work. I think that many aspiring writers think that they need some stamp of approval from a professional, and if they pay someone to edit their work, well, they're a professional, aren't they? When you really don't need to. Seriously, find critique partners. It's fellow writers, especially read their work, and if you think they're a pretty good writer, work with them. And if they tell you that they think your work is good enough and query ready, it probably is. You don't need to pay someone to help you get your work up to scratch. You can definitely do it on your own for free. One thing I love about traditional publishing is that it does have, the low barrier to entry in terms of cost. You shouldn't have to spend that kind of money to be published. And honestly, doing that work up front, kind of learning those ropes before you're querying and getting an agent is going to serve you really, really well later. Once you do have a traditional publisher, and of course there are these lovely editors there who are paid to help you edit your work, often you have to hit the ground running. There are really fast turnaround times for, editing your work or just for turning in first drafts. And so the more work you do up front without having to pay someone, to help you, the better equipped you'll be later to, produce cleaner drafts and turn around better and faster revisions. So I really just think it's in your best interest to avail yourself of all the free resources in the writing community and learn to do it yourself. I will actually entertain the idea of hiring a freelance editor. I will do a whole video on best practices for what to look for and what to consider if you do want to hire one, because if you're self-publishing, you should hire an editor. You might end up hiring more than one editor to work with for self-publishing because there are different types of editors. But also, if you really, really, really want to hire a freelance editor and you're doing traditional publishing, it's your money, not mine. I don't think you should spend it, but I can offer some tips for that, but in another video. This is my time to rant. Feels so refreshing to get this out. Let me tell you a secret that is not a secret. If you find really great critique partners, a great critique partner is as good, if not better, than a freelance editor. Why? Because I found that the majority of freelance editors who are out there offering their services right now, they're basically glorified critique partners. So many of them were critique partners. They were critique partners with authors and they were like, hey, I'm pretty good at this. I could charge for this, which is totally fine. But literally, you could just then find someone who is a critique partner who doesn't want to charge for it, and you'd get the same work, if not better. Seriously, critique partners. So I have a whole series of videos on critique partners, not only what they are and why you should work with them, but how to find them and then work with them. And I will link to those down below. I recommend you watch them because the beautiful thing about critique partners is they're free. They're free. They're totally free. Now, it's like an exchange economy. You exchange manuscripts and ideally you do find critique partners to work with whom you exchange feedback, so you have to do something for it. I do know people who have hired freelance editors to help them on their book before querying, and it's kind of a mixed bag. A few of my friends did it and they honestly regretted it. Luckily, they weren't out a ton of money because they were hiring more affordable editors. Of course, they were more affordable because they had fewer professional qualifications, and ultimately they were just really disappointed with what they got out of it. I also just really don't like the idea of freelance editors who kind of take advantage of writers, and some of them honestly do. Some of them are perfectly fine and really qualified and good at what they do, but I find that the vast majority don't have particular qualifications for being a freelance editor, and I just don't think they're providing, enough of a service to justify paying them to do it. I just never like to see an author taken advantage of or strung along. And I think that paying for a freelance editor before you query can contribute to that. You're essentially bleeding money, hoping to get good enough to a certain point. We all struggle with that, and the struggle is a real thing. But there are ways of working on your book and improving your manuscript and improving your own skill set without putting out any money. So really the thing that I don't like is the exorbitant, cost of hiring a freelance editor. I don't think it's a good idea, and most importantly, you definitely don't have to. It's not a requirement, it's not industry standard, it's the opposite of industry standard. Most people, including agents, do not recommend that you pay a freelance editor to look at your work. And just as a button to this, though I will cover it, of course, in my more detailed video about what you should consider if you are going to hire an editor, I want to point out that I've noticed an uptick of agents, especially, who are also offering freelance editorial services, and I want to say that I'm very wary of that. So if you see an agent who does give the advice, yes, I think you should hire a freelance editor, double check that they are not they themselves a freelance editor or very close friends or married to a freelance editor, because I always kind of raise my eyebrow when I see an industry professional give that advice. You do not need to hire a freelance editor before you query or in order to get published. Traditional publishing just doesn't work that way. So that's it. That's my rant about hiring freelance editors. My heart breaks a little every time I get the question, and I answer it every time because I don't want anyone to waste their money. So I just really hope this video was helpful to clarify what kind of is industry standard, why I don't recommend it, and as I said, because I'm a sucker for helping, I will film a video with some tips and tricks for evaluating who is or isn't a good investment as a freelance editor, because I can't stop you from hiring one, and again, if you're self-publishing, hire an editor. So look for that coming really, really soon. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe. I post new videos 2 to 3 times a week all about writing, craft, the industry, YA, books, and so on. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, guys, happy writing.